It's not every day that you find yourself shoved into the back of a police car, hands cuffed behind your back, with an officer looking at you like you've just masterminded a bank heist. But that's exactly where I was last night, me, Elon Musk, sitting there trying to understand how on earth such a bizarre mix-up could even happen. Now, before I tell you the full story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been mistaken for someone else in a way that completely changed the situation around you? Maybe a teacher once blamed you for something another student did, or maybe a stranger swore they'd seen you somewhere you've never been. Share your story in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have had a moment where reality twisted in such an unfair but almost comical way. Here's how it all started. It was late in the evening, and I'd just finished a long meeting at Tesla. My brain was fried, my caffeine levels dangerously low, and I thought, okay, Elon, time to grab some food like a normal human being for once. So, I put on a hoodie, pulled the hood up, and decided to walk to this little taco place nearby. Nothing fancy, just me, some fresh air, and the dream of devouring 2, maybe 5 tacos in peace. What I didn't know is that just 20 minutes earlier, someone in the same neighborhood had apparently done something very illegal. The only description the police had was painfully vague. Tall guy, wearing a hoodie, acting suspicious. That was it. No name, no face, no real details. Just a flimsy description, broad enough to fit half the people walking down the street that night, and apparently that was all it took to set off a full search. So there I was, standing in line, scrolling on my phone, half asleep from exhaustion, when suddenly I felt a firm tap on my shoulder. I turned around, expecting to see a fan asking for a photo, but instead I found myself staring at 2 very serious police officers. One of them immediately said, "Sir, we need you to step outside." At first, I honestly thought it was a prank. Maybe one of my friends had set this up. Maybe someone was filming for social media. I even chuckled and asked what this was about, but they didn't laugh. Their faces stayed cold and professional, and that's when it hit me this was real. "Sir," the taller officer repeated, "you match the description of a suspect we're looking for. We need to ask you a few questions." And here's the strange thing. Even if you know you haven't done anything wrong, your mind still races with worst-case scenarios. What if they don't believe me? What if this turns into something bigger? What if people snap photos, and by morning the headlines explode with wild speculation? 5 minutes later, I was outside, hands cuffed behind my back, while half the taco place pressed against the windows to watch. To them, it must have looked like I'd just been caught red-handed pulling off some kind of late-night crime. In reality, I was just hungry, and now humiliated. If you've ever had that moment where you try to explain something obvious about yourself and no one believes you, multiply that frustration by 1,000, that's where I was. After the officers pulled me into their car, they told me not to worry, that it was probably just a misunderstanding. But the second the door slammed shut, reality changed. I wasn't Elon Musk anymore, I was a suspect. And suspects don't get the benefit of the doubt, no matter what their net worth is. The drive felt both endless and absurd. I tried joking with the officers, saying, "Hey, listen, I'd really like to finish those tacos I was about to order. Can we just clear this up quickly?" No response. I mentioned SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. Still nothing. One officer glanced at me in the rearview mirror and said flatly, "Sir, impersonating a public figure won't help your case." That's when it dawned on me. They genuinely thought I was faking being me. Now picture this. You've spent decades working on rockets, cars, satellites, brain-computer interfaces. You've been on every major news outlet, every documentary, and yet in that cramped back seat, none of it mattered. To them, I was just a tall guy in a hoodie with a story. When we got to the station, things only got worse. The first officer walked me through the door and announced, "We've got the suspect." Heads turned, and suddenly all eyes were on me. One young officer looked at me, squinted, and whispered to his partner, "Isn't that?" But before he could finish, his partner shook his head. "No way. Musk doesn't walk around here in hoodies buying tacos." I wanted to laugh, but my wrists ached from the cuffs, and the situation was spiraling. They sat me down in a small room, the kind you see in TV shows, with a buzzing fluorescent light and a table that had seen too many sleepless nights. The officer across from me pulled out a clipboard and started with the basics. Name? Elon Musk. He sighed, already annoyed. Sir, let's try this again. Your real name. I stared at him. That is my real name. Another officer joined in, smirking like he'd caught me in a lie. All right, buddy. If you're really Elon Musk, what's the launch window for the next Falcon 9 mission? I smiled. October 7th, 8:36 p.m. Eastern, weather permitting. Payload is a batch of Starlink satellites. They exchanged looks. One of them scribbled something on the clipboard. The other muttered, he did his research. At this point, my frustration turned into something else, amusement. Here I was, the supposed mastermind of a crime, now accused of being too good at impersonating myself. Hours dragged on. They asked me to empty my pockets. My phone, my wallet, even the receipts from Tesla's cafeteria. Fake IDs, one officer muttered as he examined my driver's license. This is a pretty elaborate setup. I leaned back and laughed, maybe a little too hard. Do you really think someone would go through all this trouble creating Tesla receipts, faking a California license, memorizing rocket launch times, just to stand in line for tacos? Silence. Then, one officer said, stranger things have happened. The more I insisted, the deeper the hole seemed to get. At one point, they even Googled me on a computer right in front of me. My photos popped up, dozens of them. Me on stage, me at rocket launches, me shaking hands with world leaders. The officer leaned in, then looked back at me, then back at the screen. He frowned. Okay, he looks like you. But how do we know these aren't doctored? That was the moment I realized no amount of facts, no achievements, no fame could override the human brain once it's locked into doubt. Then came the final straw. Someone higher up entered the room, maybe a captain or lieutenant, I don't know. He stared at me for a long moment, then asked, all right, if you're really Elon Musk, prove it. Call someone important. So I did. With my one allowed phone call, I dialed a number I knew would end this circus. Hey, I said when the line connected, it's Elon. Can you please explain to these officers that I am who I say I am? The room went silent. Every officer leaned in, waiting. And then, through the speakerphone, came a tired but unmistakable voice. Elon, what did you get yourself into this time? It was my lawyer. The officers exchanged panicked looks. One even whispered, oh my God, it is him. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. Chairs squeaked, papers shuffled, apologies mumbled. The cuffs came off, replaced by awkward smiles and nervous laughter. But even as I rubbed my sore wrists, I couldn't shake one thought, how fragile identity really is. Strip away context, remove the headlines, the suits, the stage lights, and you're just another person trying to explain yourself to someone who doesn't want to believe. And the strangest part? For a brief moment, I almost felt free. Like without the label, without the weight of being Elon Musk, I was just a guy in a hoodie again. But that feeling didn't last. By the time they escorted me out, I knew the headlines were coming, and I couldn't help but wonder what version of this absurd night the world would choose to believe. The cuffs were gone, but the silence in that small room was heavier than iron. I rubbed my wrists, still red from the steel, and looked at the officers as they shuffled uncomfortably in their seats. One of them finally cleared his throat and spoke, his voice almost apologetic but still stiff with protocol. Mr. Musk, it appears there's been a mix-up. I raised an eyebrow. A mix-up? Another officer slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside was a grainy, black and white photo, clearly taken from a security camera. I leaned in, and for a moment, even I froze. The man in the picture, broad shoulders, same height, same messy hair, looked shockingly like me. Same hoodie style, same awkward posture. For a second, it felt like looking into a distorted mirror. This individual, the officer explained, tapping the photo, is wanted in connection with a series of thefts. Our database flagged him as being in the area tonight. And according to multiple witnesses, he was last seen heading toward the very taco stand you walked into. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So you're telling me you mistook me for this guy because he eats tacos in the same neighborhood? The officer winced. With all due respect, sir, the resemblance is uncanny. Combine that with the location, the timing, and, well, we thought we had our man. I leaned back, shaking my head. It was absurd. Elon Musk, CEO of multiple companies, builder of rockets, confused for a petty thief just because he looked like him and was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Do you know how many billions of dollars in technology I oversee? I asked, half smiling, half exasperated. Do you think I'd risk all of that for a couple of stolen wallets and a taco? One younger officer actually chuckled under his breath before catching himself. Another shot him a look as if to say, shut up before you make this worse. That's when the captain entered the room, the same stern man who earlier demanded I prove myself. Only now, his voice had softened. Mr. Musk, he began carefully, we owe you a formal apology. We had reason to believe the suspect would appear in this district tonight. When you matched the description almost perfectly, and the timing aligned, well, let's just say our system flagged you as a high-confidence match. I crossed my arms. High confidence? Your system thinks the richest man in the world is moonlighting as a local criminal? He didn't answer right away. Finally, he sighed. Our system isn't perfect. At the end of the day, it still depends on humans interpreting the data. And sometimes, humans get it wrong. For a moment, I didn't know whether to be angry or amused. But then I realized this wasn't just about me. This could have happened to anyone. Someone without lawyers on speed dial. Someone without the name recognition to eventually get the benefit of the doubt. Do you understand, I said quietly, that if I wasn't me, if I didn't have the ability to call in proof, you would have locked me up tonight? And tomorrow the world would read about a thief instead of the truth? The captain nodded, his expression heavy. Yes, sir, and we take full responsibility. We are very sorry. They went further. One officer actually brought me coffee, his hands shaking slightly as he placed it on the table. Another muttered, big fan, by the way, as if that could erase the hours of humiliation. But apologies, I've learned, don't undo an experience. They don't erase the memory of being handcuffed, of being doubted, of being reduced to a suspect, just because the world decided you looked like the wrong person. As they escorted me out of the station, I glanced back at that grainy photo still lying on the table. That other me, the doppelganger, the stranger whose face had nearly cost me my freedom for the night. And it made me wonder, how many times in life do we get mistaken for someone else? Not literally, but figuratively. How often do people project onto us their own assumptions, their own stories, their own fears, until they're convinced they know who we are? We live in a world that thrives on quick judgments, on data that claims to know the truth but often misses the human beneath it. Tonight, I wasn't Elon Musk, the innovator. I wasn't a CEO or a father or a dreamer of Mars. I was just a resemblance, a convenient fit for a story that wasn't mine. And maybe that's the real lesson here. We can't always control how the world sees us, but we can control how we respond when it does. I walked out into the cool night air, free again, but not unchanged. The tacos were long gone, the hunger forgotten. What lingered was something deeper. The realization of just how fragile identity is, and how quickly it can be stolen, twisted, or confused. The officers had their apology. The headlines, I knew, would have their story. But only I carried the weight of what it really felt like, sitting in that room, staring at a face that wasn't mine, and yet, somehow, was. It's been several days since that night, and the memory still lingers in my mind like a strange dream. I keep asking myself, did they ever catch the real man they were looking for? The one who apparently looked just like me, who was supposed to be in that exact place at that exact time? I still don't have the answer. Maybe he's behind bars now. Maybe he's still out there, walking the streets unnoticed. And maybe I'll never know. But what I do know is this. I chose not to file a complaint. I didn't call my lawyers, didn't demand someone be punished for what happened. I could have people in my position often do. But I didn't. Because at some point during those long hours of replaying everything in my head, I realized something. Everyone makes mistakes, even those in uniform. Even those whose job is to protect us, to act with precision and authority. And the truth is, their mistake could have ended badly. It could have escalated into something much worse. But it didn't. I walked away with only shaken nerves and a strange story to tell. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about pride, or about being Elon Musk, or about having the power to make it right. This was about understanding the humanity behind the badge. Those officers weren't robots, they weren't flawless guardians. They were people, just like you, just like me. We live in a world that's quick to judge, quick to condemn, quick to demand perfection from others, especially from those who serve. But perfection doesn't exist. Not in the police, not in business, not in life. Mistakes will happen. The real test isn't whether we fall short, but whether we can admit it, whether we can forgive it, and whether we can grow stronger because of it. So I didn't take revenge. I didn't go public to shame them. Instead, I took a step back and tried to see it from their perspective. Imagine being them for a second, standing there, believing you've cornered a dangerous criminal, acting on incomplete data, adrenaline rushing through your veins, and then realizing you got it wrong. That takes courage to admit too. If there's one thing I've learned in business, in science, in life itself, it's this. Humility is not weakness. Humility is strength. It's the reminder that no matter how far we've come, no matter what we've built, we are all human, we are all fallible. And maybe that night was the universe's way of reminding me of that fact. Because when the lights go out, when the titles fade away, when there's no company logo, no headlines, no billions, we are left with just ourselves. People who stumble, who learn, who sometimes get it wrong. And if we cannot forgive that in others, then how can we ever hope to be forgiven ourselves? That's the lesson I took away. Not anger, not bitterness. Just a quiet understanding that sometimes life teaches you more in the moments you least expect, standing on a dark street, mistaken for someone you're not, than in all the years of success, fame, and glory. And maybe, just maybe, that's what it means to truly be human. Furthermore, the incident has strengthened my sense of perspective. We often magnify events in our minds, allowing a single moment to overshadow months or years of experience. Yet, when we step back, we see that life is far larger than any one mistake or misunderstanding. That night, although deeply unsettling, is just one thread in the larger tapestry of my life. It reminds me to weigh events in context, to respond thoughtfully, and to maintain a broader view when confronted with adversity. Finally, the moral that emerges is timeless. Life will always present challenges, misjudgments, and moments of confusion. Our responsibility is not to control every external event, but to choose how we respond. By embracing empathy, patience, and understanding, we transform potentially negative experiences into lessons that shape character and strengthen resilience. Mistakes will happen. Misunderstandings will occur. But how we navigate them with grace, clarity, and humanity is what defines us. I hope this reflection serves as a reminder that even in situations where we feel powerless or misunderstood, there is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to act with integrity. Life is a series of moments, some challenging, some enlightening, and some confounding. How we respond in each moment determines the quality of our experience and the impact we have on the world around us. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that mistakes happen, that even the most unexpected and confusing situations can be faced with patience and grace. Subscribe if you want to explore how we can navigate life's uncertainties, how we can respond to misunderstandings without anger, and how we can turn moments of chaos into lessons of resilience. Have you ever been in a situation where everything went wrong, yet the only choice was to stay calm and see it through? How did you respond, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? Sharing your story might help someone else realize they too can find clarity and strength, even when life seems completely unpredictable.